Amen. Well, what I'd like to do, to start off with, I got some of your names, but I didn't get everybody's names. So if I could get, so just briefly introduce your name, your kids and their ages, and then quickly, one hero that you had when you were a kid. It could be a parent, it could be a teacher, it could even be a fictional character, like a movie character or a character from a book, or a actual person from history. But someone that had a positive influence on you when you were growing up. And so, let's see. I got Kit, and you have 3 kids, right? And what are their ages?
12, 10, and 6.
Okay. And Hero.
Oh man, I didn't think I'd have to go first. I'd say Joe Montana. Growing up, the Niners were big then in the 80s. So.
There you go. Very good. And okay, April.
Right here.
All right, there's April.
I have 3 adult children and 10 grandkids. And grandkids go from 4 to 27.
Wow.
My oldest child is 47 today.
Oh, great. Okay.
So we've been through it. My hero growing up, I think I'd have to say, I'm adopted, and my oldest adopted sister is 14 years older than me, and she was my hero. She's always been my biggest cheerleader, and been there for me and encouraged me.
That's great. Very good. Now, Brittany and Phil, I'm picking on the people that I met first.
Yeah. We have 3 kids. They're 4, 6, and 8. Yes, hero. I don't know. I'm sorry. Who's your hero?
Did you have a hero, Phil? Growing up? Someone that had a positive influence on your life, that you admired for certain qualities that you looked up to?
Trying to think about I'm not sure you know this.
Okay. I'll come back to you guys. Think about it. I'll come back to you. And Nicole.
I just have one boy who's 4, and I would probably just say my grandma because she raised me and my sister.
Your grandma.
So, yeah.
Great. Excellent. Okay, now, let's see, back here. What's your name and your kids and their ages, and a hero from when you were growing up? Someone you admired.
So, Eric and Shelly Ivers.
See, what's your name again?
Eric and Shelly.
Eric, okay.
Yep. Our kids are 14 and 7.
Okay.
Hero. Let's go with Jill Montana.
Oh, we have two Joe Montanas. Okay. Oh yeah, because you didn't hear him say it. Okay. Excellent. And how about you, Shelly?
I was going to say my grandma too, so I guess we just matched this team.
Okay, good. Okay, let's go here and go around. What's your name?
I'm Jody.
Jody. All right. And kids?
1, 17.
And who was a positive influence?
I would say my dad.
Very good. How about you guys?
I'm Andrew, my wife Melissa. We have 5 kids. Oldest is 16, 13, 11, 7, and 3.
Okay. Very good.
All right, I'll have to think on the hero for a bit.
Okay.
Grandparents.
Mm-hmm. Great. How about you guys?
I'm Sarah. This is John. We have 3 kids, 4 and 7 and 9. And one of my heroes was Miss Evelyn, and she taught my Sunday school class when I was little, maybe kindergarten or 1st grade or something.
That's great.
And I had a youth minister that drug me along to a lot of different things, kept me where I should be.
Very good. Awesome. How about you guys?
Tim and Liz. Our kids are 16 and 12. And I'd probably say a youth pastor in high school.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Liz?
I'm a high school English teacher.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And how about you guys?
Court and Caitlin, and we have a soon-to-be 5-year-old, 2-year-old, and a 2.5-week-old.
Yes.
And then Hero, I had an obsession with Spider-Man. So.
Okay. Very good. How about you, Caitlin?
I think for me, probably my sophomore history teacher.
Very good. And let's see, a couple more here. How about you guys?
I'm Penny, and I have 2 adult children, 38 and 34, and I have 2 grandchildren, one that's 7 and one that's 4. And then I have another son. Almost forgot him. He's 27.
You can forget him.
Very good.
He kind of just came into the picture, so that's
Okay. Came late.
Came late.
How about you?
I'm Brittany. I have 1 boy, he's 4.
Okay. Now, some of you mentioned teachers, and there's a neat story about a teacher who every year she would do this activity, and maybe your teachers did this with you guys when you were little, where everybody in the class would write down on a piece of paper, like there'd be a paper for each student, and like Mikey or whatever, and they'd hand around the Mikey paper, and everybody would write something positive that they liked about Mikey, and everybody had their own sheet, and they'd pass them around and fill up the sheet about all the things that your classmates admired about you and liked about you. And then this was before the Vietnam War, and then one of her students grew up and entered the Vietnam War, and he was killed in the Vietnam War. And when they looked through his belongings on him, there was that sheet of paper.
Oh.
They went to the funeral, and his teacher, and some of his classmates from school went to the funeral, and they shared that sheet of paper was on him when he died. And it makes me, I want to cry. And it just showed how positive, teachers and fellow classmates can have on one another. And all the classmates said, I still have that same piece of paper.
Wow. Oh, wow.
And it just spoke so much to have the admiration of your classmates and your teachers. And for that guy, it was probably one of the most powerful things in his life, that because he kept it on him his whole life. And the reason I asked the question about the hero is because we call it a healing image. It's an image that you can bring up at any time when you need some wisdom in your role as parents. And it may work. I don't know if it'll work for Joe Montana or Spider-Man. Maybe Spider-Man. I don't know. But maybe Joe Montana.
Hey, cool under pressure, Joe Montana.
There, see, yeah. So maybe it works.
I was thinking this nailed it.
Okay. And Spider-Man too. That's right. He's like fighting superheroes, and he's calling. Okay, you're totally right. Okay, you're right. Yeah, because so you can call up those images, even if it is Joe Montana, and you can gain strength from that and say, hey, what would he do in this situation? He'd stay cool even though there's 300-pound linemen coming at him. And we, in the parenting kind of realm, we call that the ability to feel and deal. To be able to feel your emotions that sometimes are rising in the parenting role, and have empathy for your child's emotions, but to be able to be the adult in the room and cope. Now, when I worked at a psychiatric hospital during my internship year, there was and this is before I had kids, this is where I learned a little bit about kids. One time, after working in this hospital for about 6 months, there was a tour group of Girl Scouts that were taking a tour. I don't know where they were taking a tour of a psychiatric hospital, but they didn't. But it was kind of strange thinking about it. But they obviously didn't go in the units; they just in the main hall or something. I don't know. But I was in shock when I saw these normal group of kids coming through. They were polite. They opened doors for people. They said please and thank you. Because I was used to dealing with kids in this hospital that would kick you in the shins, spit at you, and I remember the scrawny little 4-year-old kid that was, he couldn't have been more than 30 pounds soaking wet, but he taught me some cuss words that I'd never even heard before. And he had serious difficulty with what we call emotion regulation, which means his emotions weren't cool under pressure like Joe Montana. He learned that in his home that he could kind of control things by blowing up. And so he learned to basically he was kind of in control of that house. He'd throw a tantrum and he'd get what he wanted. And so he thought he could do that in our hospital. And so he'd throw a fit and he'd go in the infamous padded room where the only requirement was all you have to do is be quiet for 1 minute and you get out. He held the record, from my experience there, for tantruming. He tantrumed for 2 hours in this room, kicking and screaming, and we'd have a little window we could make sure he was safe and everything. So that was the first day. After about a week, the tantrums went down to 1 hour. After 2 weeks, he no longer needed the timeout room. And I'd never seen such a change in a kid. And he became like those little Girl Scouts who were polite and respectful. He'd bump into you and oh, sorry, Mr. Olson, are you okay? And I was like, wait a minute, you're supposed to be kicking me in the shins and spitting at my face and cussing me and teaching me cuss words that I'd never heard before. And he learned, we didn't do anything other than provide a safe, nurturing environment. He learned to calm his emotions down because he wanted to get out of that timeout room. And in 2 weeks, he was able to do that. He learned quickly that, it doesn't work here. What I learned in my home doesn't work anymore. And we worked with his mom and helped her learn some of these skills on how to be loving and firm and all this type of thing. And so that's probably one of the biggest challenges in parenting is coping with our kids' emotions and coping with our own. Now, the research on parent-child attachment is very interesting. They have done a lot of research on how parents and children connect. And the good news is that even if we have come from traumatic backgrounds, if we come to terms with our story, the good and the bad of our life story, we are able, and so if we come to terms with that, meaning that if we kind of do some soul searching and look at how we were parented, how that impacted us, how we want to parent, but also some of the good things that we learned from our parents growing up, or caregivers or guardians or whoever raised us, or grandparents or whatever. And if we're able to communicate our story in a way that makes sense, like to a loving friend or a counselor or a pastor or someone that will listen to our story, if we're able to communicate our story and come to terms with the good and the bad of our story and the impact that that had on who we are now and who we are as a parent, then we can have healthy attachments with our kids. If we don't come to terms with our story, if we don't do that soul searching and don't look at our past and understand how that impacted us and decide how we want to write the next chapter in our life, if we don't do that, we're at risk of repeating some of the same negative patterns in our life that we learned, or going the extreme opposite way of how we were parented, instead of finding a balanced middle path where there's appropriate nurturing and appropriate boundaries. So the good news is, if we can find this, what we call coherent narrative, it's a story that makes sense. If we can do that, the chances that we can have a positive attachment with our kids is stronger. And so I'm going to hand out some of these, because this is a handout from a book called The Whole Brain Child. And this is a 2-page summary of what I just went over. And if you're looking for more details on what that means to kind of come to terms with your story, you'll find it in here. And also in that other handout with the lighthouse on the front of it, that's kind of a general parenting handout that also kind of describes that a little bit too. And there's a really good book that describes this in detail. It's called Parenting from the Inside Out by Dan Siegel. And so a lot of times people think that, oh, because I was, had a really rough childhood, I can't be a good parent. And my dad is living proof that that's not true. His dad was an alcoholic and would come home and trash the house every night. And so my dad could have perpetuated that cycle, like often happens in children of alcoholics. Fortunately, my dad changed the story, and he didn't want to do that. And luckily for me, he was a much, far more healthy father than my grandfather was to him. And so you can change the story, and that's the good news. And if we come to terms with our story, then we're able to learn some skills to be able to regulate our emotions. And I call it the ocean of emotion. And sometimes they run high in the little kids, and then sometimes we see the terrible twos again in the teenage years. And so one of the key factors in kind of coming to terms with the story and being able to regulate our emotions is being able to have an anchor for our soul. And I have another handout that I want to go over that kind of talks about this. And it's kind of based on the 23rd Psalm, which, as you all know, talks about the Lord being our shepherd. And I wrote kind of a parallel to the 23rd Psalm, kind of looking at what it would be like if our kids or if a child had a healthy parent and we were able to give our children what they need, what that might look like in a psalm. If a kid was writing a song to the parent, just kind of like David wrote the song to God, his heavenly parent. And here's what it goes like. My parent is my guardian and my provider. She guides my daily routine, making sure that I am well fed and rested. He teaches me right from wrong, so I learn to respect myself, my family, and my community. Even when I face scary situations, I will have courage because I remember your wise words. I may not always like your discipline, but I know it is for my good in the long run. No matter who is against me, I know you will always be there to listen and bring peace. Your vote of confidence in me is a blessing each day. Your generous spirit that brings contentment will always travel with me. Your love and goodness will continually dwell in the home of my heart. And so, based on that, I'm going to give this handout to you guys. And I want you to, amongst your tables here, I want you to discuss this. There's some reflection questions at the bottom that I want you to discuss as a table. And we're going to take maybe 3 to 5 minutes and discuss these reflection questions at the bottom. And then you have to appoint a speaker and share with the group what are some of the main things you guys went over on those reflection questions. Okay, let's bring it together and see if you can choose a leader to give some feedback to the bigger group. So wrap it up.
I know. We have a friend that works with so then we were, anyways, but then we started having that.
Okay, good job. Very good job. Great discussion. I was hearing a lot of excellent words of wisdom being shared. So which table wants to go first and has a spokesman and is ready to give a few ideas of what you guys discussed?
Oh, I'll do it. I just want you to know I was elected.
Oh, good. That's good.
That's how I ended up
Or
with this.
voluntold.
Yeah. Basically, they all said, Timmy, you're gonna do it, right? I was like, okay. What came out of what do you want your children to remember about being parented by you? One was to be honest, no matter if you'll get in a little bit of trouble, because that honesty, I think, brings a closeness that's very important, and especially as they get older. Another one was that I'm always in their corner. And just there, because sometimes kids get to where they're questioning whether their parent loves them, or from outside influences they're hearing things or something.
Yeah.
And that can really shake them, and so they start asking these questions and you're going, where do you get this from? And the other one was that they're deeply loved.
Yeah.
And then what is the song, story, or picture? They painted across their heart. One was being independent. Another was to love people, take care of the vulnerable, and love the Lord, knowing He's always there. Because eventually, we as parents won't be here, and it will shake your children to their core, and they need to know that God never dies, He never leaves, He's always there.
Yeah. Good.
And then, where do you find your deepest security or anchor to your soul? And some said mom, and some said the Lord, and some said a combination of both.
Yeah. Good.
Okay.
Thank you, Penny. Great job. Way to start us off. Now we'll go to this table.
All right. Well.
And you don't have to answer all the questions, but just whatever was on the.
So for what do you want your children to remember about being parented by you? We said experiences were important, and we felt like we wanted our children to not just have quality time, we wanted them to have abundance of time with us, and not see us distracted with whether that be work or our phones or this or that.
Yeah.
And then that we wanted to create a safe place for our children where they can have open conversations with us, talk about struggles, so we can kind of work through them and
Good.
not feel like they have to always hide. The picture, we said we just want them to feel the love of God through us, because we could see kind of how being raised by our own parents, how much that can affect how we perceive God.
Yeah.
And so whether that be good or bad, in my case, I've had some struggles in the early walk of my Christian faith because of how my dad raised me.
Yeah.
So we want them to feel that safe, loving care of God through how they experience us. And then deepest security or anchor, we felt like the Christian answer was the same God.
Yeah, Jesus.
But also at our homes, a place where we come back and rest and rejuvenate and get ready for the next day to face the world. So.
Good. Thank you, Court. Good job. How about you guys?
We didn't get to the third question. I'll just start with.
You guys had a lot of good discussions. Yes.
Kept going. I think the first question probably ended up falling around the consistency idea that life isn't going to be all the warm fuzzies, the nurturing part. Well, that's not the right word, but the warm fuzzies of parenting.
Yeah.
Sometimes discipline has to come in.
Yeah.
But that they could depend on us to be consistent.
Yeah.
Would be. Yeah.
Very good. Yeah.
And then I'm kind of at a loss about number 2. Does anybody remember what we said? Yeah. We did start talking about kind kind of what has already been mentioned about how important it is, it feels like in this day of parenting, to make sure that our kids know that we'll love them always, no matter what.
Yeah.
No matter what choices they make. Even before, we have felt that it's important that they start hearing that even before they reach maybe even the age of capable of some crazy choices, you know.
Yeah.
They're just stealing the brownies, you know, they're not, there's nothing more going on, you know, we have a wide variety of things going on, but, and everybody seemed to kind of mention that, just that it's important to combat the mistruths that the kids are hearing outside the home that might make them question our love for them.
Yeah.
So to keep telling them that.
Good. Excellent. Good job. Very good. No, you did a great job. How about this last table?
Well, we talked about things that we want our children to remember about being parented by us or grandparented. Is that they were loved without condition, and I liked what was said over at this other table about being honest with them. But another thing that was mentioned is the idea of I want them to grow up with a sense of being able to own their own choices. And the word responsibility came out in that.
Yeah. Very good.
Responsible for their actions and their choices. And when we came to a song, Nicole and Ben both know the words to the song "Victory," about the battle belongs to the Lord. And I thought that was a great picture of their experience together. I don't even remember the kids for me. But we talked about the deepest security or anchor. You know, the idea of belonging came up in that, and how important it is to be able to feel like you belong, whether it's at home or in a job or with people that you feel like you belong. And I know for me, having peace, I have a picture in my mind of God's peace standing guard over my heart and mind. If I have that peace, I can.
His peace, what?
His peace standing guard over my heart.
Guard over your
mind,
heart. Yes.
And I can weather anything as long as I have that peace.
Exactly. And that's like the picture of that lighthouse. You guys are the lighthouses shining the light because you're connected to the rock.
Yeah.
The Christ, and you can handle the storms that come your way because you're connected. Very good job. Thank you guys for the discussion, and continue this discussion, you know, as you see each other at church and or other life groups or whatever you're involved in. There's some research that kind of connects to this a little bit. They did some teacher research, and they had two groups of teachers and students. One group of teachers taught their students mindfulness skills, which is like breathing and relaxation, you know, to regulate your emotions and all this type of thing. There's all kinds of benefits of mindfulness skills. Then they had another group of teachers that didn't teach their students mindfulness skills, but they had their own practice of breathing and relaxation and mindfulness. And you'd think that the teachers that, well, then let me go back. They measured the outcomes on the kids, not only emotionally, socially, but also academically. So which group of kids did better over, like, emotionally, socially, academically?
The ones who are taught the skills.
The ones that did it on their own.
They learn their own coping mechanisms.
That's right. You'd think your guys' answer is the logical answer that you'd think would be. That's what I thought when I first was reading about this. You'd think that the teachers that taught their kids these mindfulness skills, that those kids would do better. The funny thing is the other group did way better in friendship skills, social skills, emotion regulation, and even academically, their scores went up. In the group where the teachers didn't teach these kids mindfulness skills, but had their own mindfulness practice. So this new research on mindfulness is kind of catching up with 3,000-year-old wisdom from Psalms 46. Be still and know that I am God. He's our fortress. Like you were talking about April. He's our fortress. We've known this in the Christian tradition for thousands of years. Prayer and meditation on the truths of God and connecting our hearts with God's heart helps us be at peace in the midst of life's storm because we have a deeper meaning and a deeper relationship with our Creator. Now, in the neuropsych and the research and the child development research, they're finding out this stuff 3,000 years later that we've known for thousands of years already. Prayer and meditation works, but they're not doing it from a Christian perspective. But still, even if they're non-Christians, doing some time just to be still and to breathe and relax and to come to terms with our thoughts and our emotions and our memories and not have to react and not have to judge them. It's what I call free therapy, is sitting and breathing and taking some time to pray and meditate. It helps you find compassion for yourself if these negative thoughts come up that aren't compassionate toward yourself, and you go, oh, where'd that come from? Oh yeah, that's where that came from. And again, you're coming to terms with your story when you're sitting and not having to be busy. You're just being still in God's presence and asking Him for guidance to help you come to terms with your story. If you do that, the kids in your presence, or teacher and students, the students learn to regulate their emotions just by being in the presence of someone that knows how to regulate their emotions. It's like a wireless connection between our brain and the kid's brain. That a lot of it is nonverbal, how we communicate our love, our tone of voice, patting them on the back, the way we are with them. We're less reactive. We're able to do this. A lot of times we react as parents instead of respond. Right. If we take time to be still and be with God and get our stuff organized as far as our past and our story and our goals of how we want to be as a parent, what we want our kids to learn from us, then when our emotions run high, at any time we can connect to the rock, right? Be still and know that I'm God. At any time we can take a deep breath. God, help me right now do what you would have me do, or what Joe Montana would have me do, or Spider-Man, or my grandma, or my teacher, who no matter what we threw at her, she always was loving, but she was firm. Usually it's the firm teachers that were my favorite teachers. But I avoided them there's one professor in grad school, he was this really hard teacher in grad school, and everybody said, oh, don't take his class, because he's really hard. He taught me more about the Bible he was a Bible teacher than I ever learned from anybody. He was the most powerful teacher I've ever had. But I avoided him, but then when I took him, he was very loving, but very hard, and as far as his coursework, but he was fair, but firm. So the more we come to terms with our story and do some prayer and meditation and do that work, that hard work, then when our emotions are running high and our kids' emotions are running high, do this. Stop. It's just S-T-O-P. In your mind, you can remember this easily. Stop. Stop. Take a breath. Open and observe. You don't have to react or fix. Just observe what's going on. And then proceed in line with your values. In line with what you want your kids to remember about being parented by you. And also on page, let's see here. In this booklet, the Lighthouse booklet here, on page, I think it's page 9. Yeah, on page 9, there's a list of questions called Your Story on page 9 and 10. And these are the questions that are kind of that based on the attachment research that showed that if we come to terms with our story, going through these types of questions, that will help us write the next chapter in the way that we want to. And so, so that's kind of tied to that Psalms 46 verse that I love. Be still and know that I'm God. And I love that whole verse. So the last three things I want to go over, and before we open up for some discussion and some questions, these are kind of just my three keys that I really like that kind of summarize a lot of parenting ideas. And the first one is value the relationship over changing the behavior. Now, the reason why this is so important is because the more we try to change behavior, the more it doesn't change. Just imagine a beach ball at the swimming pool. You've probably all done this. You try to push it under the water, and the further down you get, the harder it pushes back. That's kind of like our kids' emotions. The more that we try to control their emotions or tell them not to feel that way, it's like pushing a beach ball down and it's going to pop back even harder. But the more that we value the relationship and start with empathy and try to understand their emotions, the more that they're influenced by us. And it's kind of like the idea of discipline. Discipline is more about making disciples than about controlling behavior. We want to become someone that they want to follow. There's probably my favorite parenting book that focuses on that number one, they're valuing the relationship over changing behavior, is John Gottman's book called Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child. In that book, he's one of the leading researchers on marriages. He has a lot of good marriage books, and that talk about this idea of empathy first and then problem solving. Now, for those of you who are married, you know the effectiveness of when your spouse comes to you, and us guys are pretty good at this. We try to fix the problem before we have empathy. I see some of these spouses looking sideways at each other. Yeah. So when we try to fix the problem before we try to understand the feeling, we usually get pushback, just like the beach ball under the water. The harder we try to fix the problem or control the emotion, the harder it pushes back and the person shuts down. So John Gottman in his book, and in this handout I just gave you, there's a parenting styles questionnaire that you can take, and it'll rank order your parenting styles. And pretty much every parenting book says that we have to balance firmness and love. And in this book, he talks about it in this idea of these 4 steps of having empathy first, which is being aware of your child's emotions. Don't try to fix it first. Recognize your child's expression of emotion as a perfect moment for intimacy and teaching and connection. Listen with empathy and validate your child's feelings. Help your child learn to label their emotions with words. And they'll learn that from hearing you say, oh wow, you must be angry because your brother stole your toy. That must be really hard, etc., etc. Then, after we've done the empathy piece, then we set limits when you're helping your child to solve problems and deal with upsetting situations appropriately. So there is a place for problem solving and limit setting and boundaries, but we can't lead with that. I mean, sometimes if there's a dangerous situation, you got to grab your kid and get him out of the street, right? I'm not saying not to do that, but empathy first, then problem solving. And this is good for marriages too. When your spouse comes to you with a problem, try to communicate that you understand them first. And really check for understanding. Hey, did I get that right? You're feeling this because of this and this and this and this and da-da-da. And then check. Hey, is that right? Yeah, that's exactly right. Or maybe no, well, it's kind of right, but hey, you got, here's a little bit other detail that I wanted to explain. Okay, let me see if I get that right. Really try to communicate that you understand how they're feeling. Then you can say, hey, do you want to talk about some ideas about what we can do about this situation? That's when we go to problem solving. And so I'd recommend taking that parenting styles questionnaire. You can score it up and it'll rank your parenting styles. And it tells about on this sheet I just handed out, the research-based effects on kids of these different styles. When we're dismissive of our kids' emotions, they learn that emotions aren't valuable, that I'm not valuable, their behavior's worse, they have trouble with friendships, things like that. But when we're the emotion coach, that's what he's trying to teach us in this book, Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child, is how to be an emotion coach. Then they're more resilient, they're able to regulate their emotions better, they have better friendship skills, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of what this is based on. It's talking about love. How do we show love? And one of the best ways is empathy. Tillich said, there's a theologian, Tillich, and he said that the first responsibility of love is to listen. And that's what empathy is about. We have to listen in order to have empathy. And I love, in my Communication 101 class at BSU, they showed us the Chinese verb for the word to listen. Here it is. It's a very interesting character in Chinese, the word to listen. And it involves the character for the picture for the ear, the picture for the eyes, the picture for the heart, and the symbol for undivided attention. So listening involves our ears, our eyes, our heart, and our undivided attention. If you're using your ears, your eyes, and your heart, and you're focusing with undivided attention, that's listening. And that's the foundation of empathy. And so then the next step is balancing with this love. There has to be firmness, which I'm going to respect myself and I'm going to respect my child. That's the sum of the law and the prophets, to love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. So if we're too overly respective of the kid and just all love and no firmness because we don't respect ourselves, there's problems. If we're all firmness and drill sergeant and no love, there's problems. It has to balance firmness and love. And if you're in a spousal relationship, one of you might be good on the love, one of you might be good on the firm, and you're going to have to get your heads together and work on backing each other up and supporting each other and helping each other get better in your weak areas. But use your strengths, because you each have strengths, to help each other be more on the same page with a balance of firmness and love, because it takes both. And then lastly, it's cultivating this obstacle as opportunity perspective, which means instead of taking the child's emotion, which is that beach ball, and trying to fix it and control it, seeing that emotion as an opportunity for a deeper connection with your child. And that's by the listening with your heart, your ears, your eyes, and undivided attention. And so kind of the three areas are love, truth, because you have to speak the truth in love when you're setting limits, and showing love. So you're going to be loving, but in a firm way. And so that's truth. So love, truth, and faith. We have to have the faith that a lot of times I talk to parents and say, imagine your kid as a mature, loving, respectful 25-year-old, and then treat them that way. And have that picture in your mind's eye of who they are becoming, and then treat them that way. And they will be more likely to become what you envision. And that's kind of the faith part. So this is the heart of parenting is love. The wise mind of parenting is truth. And then the soul of parenting is faith. And then that gets back to what we talked about as far as our connection, a deep connection with God. And so let's see here. I think those are kind of the main areas I wanted to talk about. And let's see here. So I've thrown a lot of ideas out there. Any questions or concerns, or how do we apply this, or anything else that you guys want to pick my brain on or ask questions about, or